She walked into a bank, unnoticed. A teller tossed her ID on the floor. She didn't react. No one knew her yet. By the time they realized who she really was, $5.9 billion had disappeared in an instant. It only took one careless second to destroy a billion-dollar dream. The bank lobby was quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that makes every sound feel louder than it should. The soft hum of the air conditioning echoed off marble floors. Keyboards clicked behind glass counters. A line of customers stood waiting, eyes fixed on their phones, unaware that history was about to shift. Then it happened. The teller took the ID, glanced at it, and frowned. Her eyes flicked up, then back down again. And just like that, she dropped it on the floor. Not by mistake. Not with surprise. She nudged it away with 2 fingers, as if it were something dirty. "Pick it up," she said flatly, her voice sharp and dismissive. The woman standing at the counter froze. For a brief moment, the entire room seemed to pause. Her name was Avery Cole. She was calm, composed, dressed in a perfectly tailored navy suit, the kind worn by people who belong in boardrooms, not waiting lines. Her posture was straight, her expression unreadable. To anyone paying attention, she looked like power wrapped in silence. But the teller wasn't paying attention. Avery slowly bent down. Every movement was controlled, measured. She picked up her ID from the polished floor, dusted it lightly between her fingers, and stood back up. She didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't ask for a manager. She simply met the teller's eyes for a single second and said nothing. What no one in that lobby understood, what no one could have guessed, was that Avery Cole wasn't just another customer. She wasn't there to cash a check. She wasn't there to open an account. Avery Cole was the CEO of a financial technology company valued at $5.9 billion. A company that, at that very moment, was preparing to finalize the largest merger in that bank's history. Contracts were drafted. Executives were waiting. Celebrations were planned. And all of it, every deal, every promise, every future headline, was now balanced on the edge of one careless moment. Within minutes, that merger would be erased. Not with anger, not with revenge, but with a decision that would change everything. Avery wasn't at the bank by accident. She was there for one reason: to quietly finalize a confidential merger between her company, Colgate Systems, and the very bank whose lobby she was standing in. If the deal went through, it would become one of the most important partnerships in the bank's history. The merger would modernize their outdated technology, cut operating costs, and push the institution into a new digital future. Board members on both sides were already celebrating behind closed doors. Press releases had been drafted and saved as ready to publish. Champagne bottles were chilled, waiting for signatures. But Avery had a rule, one she never broke. Before signing any deal, no matter how large, she needed to understand the company from the ground level. Not the executive meetings, not the polished presentations, the real experience. No assistants walking ahead of her, no bodyguards, no titles announced. Just observation. So she walked into the bank alone, dressed simply but professionally, carrying only her purse and her ID. She wanted to see how customers were treated when no one important was watching. What she experienced instead was humiliation. The teller examined her account longer than necessary, asked unnecessary questions, then frowned and asked for her ID again. After studying it, the teller leaned back in her chair and called for a supervisor. The supervisor arrived with an irritated expression, already annoyed before a word was spoken. They whispered. They glanced at Avery, then back at the screen. Finally, the supervisor spoke, her voice loud enough for nearby customers to hear. "We get a lot of fake IDs," she said dismissively. A few heads turned. Conversation stopped. The line grew quieter. People stared. Avery felt the weight of judgment settle in the room like a heavy fog. It had nothing to do with how she was dressed. Nothing to do with how she spoke or carried herself. It was about who they assumed she wasn't. Not a CEO, not a decision-maker, not someone who mattered. Avery could have corrected them. She could have ended the situation in seconds. But she didn't. She took a slow breath, thanked them politely, and gathered her belongings. As she walked out of the bank, no one stopped her. No one apologized. No one realized what they had just lost. And as the glass doors closed behind her, Avery made a quiet decision, one that would soon cost the bank everything they thought was guaranteed. Back in her car, Avery didn't cry. She didn't slam the steering wheel. She didn't shout into the empty space around her. She didn't call a lawyer. Instead, she sat quietly for a moment, hands resting calmly in her lap, staring through the windshield as people moved in and out of the bank behind her. The building looked the same as it always had. Clean, professional, confident. But Avery knew better now. She reached into her bag, pulled out her laptop, and opened it with steady hands. There was no anger in her movements, only clarity. Inside that bank, executives were preparing for what they believed was the deal of the decade. Calendars were marked. Bonuses were already being discussed. Careers were about to be made. What they didn't realize was that their future was hanging by a single thread, and that thread was already fraying. Avery scheduled a private video call with her board of directors. No assistants, no delays. The screen filled with familiar faces, leaders, investors, strategists who trusted her judgment completely. She didn't begin with emotion. She didn't describe the teller. She didn't name the supervisor. She didn't raise her voice. She asked just one question. Do we want our company associated with an institution that treats people like this? The screen went silent. No one spoke. Then Avery shared her screen. She showed them the security footage request she had already obtained. The timestamps, the written incident report, statements from witnesses who had been standing in line. And then the video played. The ID slipping from the teller's fingers. The deliberate flick across the floor. The cold command, pick it up. The stares. The silence. No commentary was needed. The board members watched every second. Some leaned closer to their screens. Others looked away. When the footage ended, Avery closed her laptop and looked directly into the camera. Her voice was calm, controlled. Final. Cancel the merger, she said. Effective immediately. No debate followed. No objections. No hesitation. The decision was unanimous. In that quiet car, without raising her voice or seeking revenge, Avery Cole ended a $5.9 billion deal, not out of anger, but out of principle. Because respect, she believed, was non-negotiable. And once lost, no amount of money could buy it back. At 3:17 p.m., the bank's CEO received the call. He didn't answer it casually. The moment he heard the words Colgate Systems is reconsidering the merger, his expression changed. At 3:19 p.m., he demanded an emergency executive meeting. Assistants rushed through hallways. Conference rooms were booked. Laptops snapped open. By 3:30 p.m., the merger announcement, scheduled to go public within hours, was quietly pulled from internal systems. No explanation was given. By 4 p.m., whispers began spreading through financial circles. Analysts noticed unusual activity. Traders asked questions. Something was wrong. And by the next morning, it was official. Colgate Systems had withdrawn from the $5.9 billion merger. The market reacted instantly. The bank stock dipped, then dropped harder. Billions in projected growth evaporated in minutes. Executives scrambled to control the narrative. Emails flooded inboxes. Legal teams were pulled into emergency calls. Public relations drafted apology statements they didn't yet understand. No one inside the bank knew how it had unraveled so fast. Until that afternoon, the glass doors opened again. But this time, Avery Cole wasn't alone. She walked in beside her legal counsel, calm and composed, her presence impossible to ignore. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. The air shifted. At the counter stood the same teller. Nearby, the same supervisor. And standing near the entrance, the same security guard who had watched silently the day before. Only now, he stood a little straighter. Avery approached the counter. I'm Avery Cole, she said evenly. CEO of Colgate Systems. The color drained from faces. Eyes widened. Breaths caught. I was here yesterday, Avery continued, her voice steady. And I was treated in a way that told me everything I needed to know about this institution. No accusations. No raised voice. Just facts. She reached into her folder and slid a single document across the counter. It wasn't a complaint. It wasn't a lawsuit. It was a termination of partnership notice. The teller's hands trembled. The supervisor didn't speak. Avery turned and walked away without another word. Behind her, a bank that had believed itself untouchable stood frozen, fully realizing that one moment of disrespect had just cost them everything. The fallout was swift. The teller was placed on immediate leave. The supervisor resigned before the week was over, and the bank issued a public apology, carefully worded, heavily reviewed, and released across every major platform. But instead of restoring trust, it did the opposite. The apology trended online for all the wrong reasons. People didn't see accountability. They saw damage control. Screenshots circulated. Commentary exploded. Former customers shared similar stories. Financial analysts questioned the bank's leadership and internal culture. What began as a small incident became a mirror, one the bank couldn't look away from. And through it all, Avery said nothing. She didn't celebrate. She didn't post. She didn't gloat. No victory laps. No public statements. Weeks later, during a quiet interview at a business conference, Avery was finally asked the question everyone had been debating online. Why cancel a $5.9 billion merger over what some called one small incident? Avery paused before answering. Then she said simply, "Because culture is revealed in small moments, and I refuse to build billions on disrespect." That quote traveled farther than any press release. Her company, Colgate Systems, moved on quickly. Within months, they partnered with another institution, one that welcomed Avery without hesitation, without suspicion, and without judgment. The deal was signed smoothly. The partnership thrived. Respect, it turned out, was good for business. As for the bank, the damage lingered. They spent years rebuilding trust, years retraining staff, years repairing a reputation that had taken decades to build and only seconds to crack. Customers remembered. Investors remembered. And internally, that moment became a case study no one wanted to revisit. All of it, every loss, every headline, every missed opportunity, traced back to a single decision made at a counter on an ordinary afternoon. All because someone thought it was acceptable to throw an ID on the floor. And that's the real lesson. You never know who's standing in front of you. And sometimes, the smallest act of disrespect can cost everything. You never know who's standing in front of you. And sometimes, one moment of disrespect can cost billions. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful, emotional, and jaw-dropping stories every week. And make sure to turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next twist-filled episode. See you in the next video.